Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency space. I'm your host, Piter, joined as always by Ozzy. Now, there's a ton to get to, so let's jump right in. Please do your own research. This is not financial advice. By the way, if you enjoy the content, please do consider liking, subscribing, commenting. It really does mean the world to us. Okay, this week, the big news, Binance. Binance has settled charges with multiple U.S. agencies, albeit one major exception. So you saw that big news conference, I'm sure. You had the CFTC guy, you had Yellen, you had Merrick Garland, Department of Justice. Everyone was there. No Gary Gensler, though. Anyway, so Binance, go ahead.
No, I was just laughing. Gary got left out of the fines party.
Yeah, but some would argue a big win for him that day anyway. But anyway, so Binance is the world's largest crypto exchange by volume. Or at least it was. Their volume has changed over the past couple or this week anyway. And they just agreed to pay federal officials in combination, it's a bunch of different stuff they're selling, $4.3 billion in fines. Also, founder CZ stepped down from his role from running the platform as part of the settlement. And he also pled guilty a couple days later to multiple money laundering violations. He has since paid a $175 million bond. At first, they're saying he's free to leave the country, but it looks like they're trying to keep him in the country. I don't know if that's 100% settled, but I think he's staying in the country. He was in Abu Dhabi, and they don't have an extradition treaty, but he voluntarily came back, and he's saying, I would come back. He just wants to go home to his family, is what he's saying. But I think they're trying to keep him in here. In the end, though, he faces, in addition to everything, he personally faces a $150 million fine and 18 months in prison. So we'll see how that plays out. Just a quick little breakdown. Department of Justice is getting a little over $2 billion. FinCEN is giving $780 million, OFAC $70 million, CFTC $1.35 billion. Other really interesting note out of this, the Justice Department is also imposing a monitorship as well as reporting requirements on Binance as part of today's decision. And this will go on, I think for 3 to 5 years. I think there's two aspects.
I think it's 3 years for most of the reporting, and there's only a few aspects that are 5.
Additional, yeah.
I think it's mainly the terror related reporting that has to go on for 5.
So a quote here from Attorney General Merrick Garland, big day for him. I didn't really know that much about him before today, so that's probably true for some other people as well. Moving forward, Binance must file a suspicious activities report that were required by law. This is one of the complaints against them, that they never filed a single suspicious activity report. The company is required to review past transactions and report suspicious activity to federal authorities as well. So they're going to get almost like an audit, all right? Before this announcement, Binance had daily volume of 17.8 billion, largest exchange, right? It's now down to about 4.7 billion and conceivably can continue to drop. And there's also been some exiting of funds from their platform as well, which I guess seems obvious. Nothing like record setting, but definitely money leaving the system.
Yeah. Money leaving the system is not unusual, especially given the fact that they were found guilty. I would assume that any of those platforms or people conducting suspicious transactions probably rushed to get their funds off as quickly as they could because they weren't sure if they were going to get clamped down on immediately. I think that's one thing to just keep into consideration. And then there's probably also people that were using it illegally from the U.S. or from other jurisdictions that had to say, we can't be associated with Binance anymore, or I'm going to get caught and I'm not going to be able to stay here. And so they left Binance. I don't think that's necessarily a big thing. The fact that there's decrease in volume, I think, is reflective of the fact that people have been moving for DEXs, and there are more perpetuals options on chain now, and Coinbase is preparing their futures options for Coinbase International. More options are coming to the market in that sense, whereas Binance used to be the major in that space.
Yeah, when I think of Binance, a lot of it I think about the token, the BNB token, but we're talking about their exchange. I never really use their exchange. I do go on chain. If I'm ever using Binance in an exchange, I'm using their DEX. I'm on PancakeSwap as opposed to their centralized. I mean, is it centralized exchange? This is what all this is surrounding, right?
Yeah, around their centralized exchange, it's their chain itself is not really facing anything. They haven't even charged them as offering BNB as a security at this point.
In other SEC lawsuits, the BNB token is mentioned as a security, but this lawsuit isn't against that aspect of the on-chain activity.
Exactly. So it's pretty interesting to see that, and I'm waiting to see what will happen. I don't think we're going to see anything major past this. If we look at the BNB coin chart,
200 I've heard as like a bottom level worth a little watching. I don't know. I don't watch their technical analysis too much, but like if it falls through 200, watch out. But I've heard that a little bit.
That would make sense looking at it from a technical chart. I'd probably say 185. If it really breaks 185, it's like, okay, there's really no recovery there.
We're in price discovery mode to the downside.
To the down till about $40 or $50, with a mild stopgap around 142, but as I said, mild stopgap. 185 was the low in June of 2022, and then we've kind of tapped 200 a few times now. The token did take a deep drop on the news on Tuesday, kind of dropping almost 11% on the day, but it recovered about almost half of that the next day. So it's bleeding again today, but not any more than most major alts. It's down about 3.25% at the time of recording, Monday, November 27th, and that's ETH at the time is about 3% down, and AVAX or NEAR are both somewhere around between 4 and 5%. Most major alts, Matic is around 3.9. So kind of sitting right about at for the rest of the market.
It'd be kind of fascinating to watch how this plays out for Binance and what happens with it. I mean, there's some speculation that it's... I saw an interesting tweet in regards to this. It had to do with BlackRock and saying that as long as kind of Binance is this big as an exchange, BlackRock will want to come in. It's kind of interesting to see him getting taken. Not that there's any evidence or whatever, just like, wow, taking out some of the big players, hopefully, or not hopefully, but to make room for, institutional investors to come in.
I think that that's a totally fair comment. On Friday, talking in Crypto News Consensus, I agreed with that statement as well. There was just market-making ability with Binance controlling about 70% of the trading volume for centralized exchanges. It was too dangerous and too big of a point of failure. Any institutional product, especially considering the fact that it was a bit of a black box. There wasn't a ton of transparency at Binance and at in terms of how it's owned, how everything's operated, and ensuring that it was compliant. And so it kind of needed you to kind of at least open up that black box, clarify things, and maybe take away some of that power as a market maker.
I think that's some of the hope with this, and I think it's hard to say, excitement around this is that this has been settled a little bit, and that the market in general can move on. Now we kind of know what's going to happen with Binance. But on the flip side of that, there is this pending, the one, Gary Gensler wasn't there, right? So there is a lawsuit, an active lawsuit with the SEC that's not settled. And then we have former U.S. Securities and Exchange Commissioner John Reed Stark, who does a lot of about this, about what's going on with the SEC, and then right now about Binance. And he made the argument that it was a huge victory for the SEC, even though they weren't. The Binance settlement that happened this week contains numerous elements that the securities regulator can leverage to bolster its case in its lawsuit against the crypto. The SEC appears to be the sole, I already said that, the sole U.S. federal government holdout for the Binance Radio Summit. So they're holding out. They haven't settled yet. They want more. The SEC now has, these are all quotes, the SEC now has at its disposal a treasure trove of fresh and comprehensive Binance-related inculpatory evidence gleaned from the various pleadings, orders, attachments, and other Binance-related charging documents as well. Binance also agreed on multiple, which we mentioned, quote, undoubtedly create unique opportunities for the SEC's investigative and litigation teams. Which means also an astonishing level of cooperation by the exchange and CZ and every single Binance employee. The SEC could use this cooperative requirements as leverage during any investigation or discovery. For instance, Binance or any employee, CZ, will not want the SEC to be complaining to FinCEN, DOJ, Treasury about the lack of cooperation. So that could lead to additional fines, penalties, and prison time. That would lead to, more prison time for CZ, say. He wants to get home to his family in Abu Dhabi. That's probably where he's life. Let's move on. Let's close this book. So he's going to want to go along with whatever. That's his argument. He's going to want to go along with whatever. Also,
I'm going to hop in there and say, I don't think he gets prison time. We've had Arthur Hayes, who we talked about a couple episodes ago, former CEO of Bitfinex, which was also a big crypto exchange, who pled guilty to similar charges, faced 2 years of probation, was his charge, and his penalties, along with a couple $100 million fine, I think, maybe $150 million, if I'm remembering. So really, the idea that CZ faces prison time is kind of absurd to me, and John Reed Stark has proven time and time again to be a very anti-crypto and so I really am not surprised that he's thinking, there's going to be some massive wins here. I think the fact
makes a pretty good argument here, though, that there's a bunch of additional information, there's a bunch of additional leverage that the SEC is going to have, and that's why they might be holding out, because they already had a big win and they have no reason to rush because they're sitting pretty.
I would disagree, because it would just make it simpler to shut the door on everything if they actually had everyone agreeing to things. The $4.3 billion that Binance is paying to FinCEN and everybody else is equal to almost all of last year's SEC budget in terms of fines. So really, unless they think that they've got mea culpa, the most rock solid possible case, the SEC didn't settle because they were either being too greedy or they actually don't have what they think they've got.
Well, just kind of finish his argument. It's just, he also said that Binance agreed to file suspicious activity reports. Any newly filed Binance-related reports like this will likely create novel, basically new and continual flow of salient and compelling leads related to Binance. And going forward, when the SEC makes reference to criminal conduct at Binance during the course of the Binance litigation, those characterizations will not be hyperbole, rumor, or conjecture. They will be a matter of fact, because they've basically pled guilty and paid fines, things admitted to it, basically. So I thought that was just an interesting in that regards.
That's an interesting argument that they can use that language, and it shows how their thought process is. However, I think there's something important to keep in mind there. They pled guilty to some, but it doesn't really matter, because JP Morgan and all of these massive banks in the US pay massive fines, probably 10 times the size of the fine that Binance have in the last 10 years. They're still operating, their bank stock's fine, really, there's not anything big. It's no different than any of those big banks getting fined.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, and Binance moves on. They have a new CEO,
Richard Tang.
Richard Tang. But he has challenges. You know, the first 24 hours, customers pulled out $695 million from Binance. So he's got to figure out a way forward and deal with all this monitoring, you know. But yeah, like you said, it goes on, and these things have happened. So.
And if they had enough evidence to shut down Binance, would have. But they don't.
Right, fair.
The fact that they don't have enough evidence to shut down Binance, like that they didn't get that within the case, it means that really they weren't doing as bad things as the SEC has accused them of in the past, or that could really be an argument for getting shut down.
Well, another one after, kind of moving on, is Kraken. So we have new charges against the SEC filed a complaint alleging that Kraken is operating an unregistered national securities exchange, broker, and clearinghouse. Let's see. And they also are accusing them of commingling funds. So for failing to prevent known conflicts of interest and commingling investor assets with it. Here's a quote from the lawsuit from the SEC. Kraken has at times held customer crypto assets valued at more than $33 billion, but has commingled these crypto assets with its own, creating what their independent auditor identified as significant risk of loss. SEC is alleging the exchange at times paid operational expenses directly from accounts that also held customer cash, which is a big issue for them. They're seeking a judgment permanently and joining the defendants from violating securities laws. It also wants to stop the exchange from acting as an unregistered exchange, broker, dealer, and clearing agency.
So shut them down.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. I just like to say exactly what they're saying. Kraken came out with a response. Today, the SEC filed a complaint alleging that Kraken operates as an unregistered exchange. We disagree with their claims and plan to vigorously defend our position. Kraken also reassured its clients and affirmed the whole crypto world that the news published by the SEC will have no impact on how Kraken conducts its business and will continue to provide services to their clients without any interruption. So Kraken not giving up that. The former CEO, the kind of the guy who started the exchange, had some interest. Is how he stopped short of celebrating the results of, and this goes back to the Binance investigation. He was kind of, quote, talking about this. He expressed the decision made the industry feel more fair, but also that there was new threats. Okay, so according to Powell, regulators and governments are taking advantage of every dodgy transaction and scapegoat in the crypto industry to tighten the noose. So most of the debate has focused on the use of cryptocurrencies for illicit purposes and has further eroded recent efforts by the industry trying to clean up its own acts to increase transparency. So this exchange that Powell co-founded back in 2011 was one of the only ones besides, I think, Coinbase to be operating on American soil. So it's highly susceptible to regular scrutiny, and they are getting attacked. Both and Kraken are facing loss. So this is a quote from him. So a $30 million settlement between the SEC and Kraken was reached earlier this year, forcing the exchange to stop its staking service. We reported on that. Powell described the latest lawsuit as just them being extorted again, as a $30 million only buys them about 10. So they're just coming, but with some legitimate claims talking about the commingling of stuff like that.
Well, they're talking with the commingling of funds, but do we have no proof of that? We have no evidence, and so to me, to accuse them of commingling funds or making a judgment on that until I see evidence that they're doing that, or and that has happened, and I'm not too worried about that. I'm more concerned. I'm more concerned whether this is going to go anywhere. I think this is exactly like the Coinbase lawsuit, and given what we've seen with the Coinbase lawsuit up until now, we don't have anything to worry about. And they can make the argument of we've got no way to register, and boom, shakalaka, like the SEC's lost this.
Yeah.
And to be fair, if you read some of the accusations in this lawsuit, it is absolutely hilarious. The SEC used Sol as one of their examples in the lawsuit of a security that's being sold.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically use statements from Solana that are saying Sol's fast to say that they were basically making and comments that were of a securities nature. So they're saying Solana is a security because Solana, like, that was the crux of their argument. And I think that just proves that there's just not nearly a strong enough case or a strong enough understanding of what a security is at the SEC to even bother paying attention to.
So, like, the idea that Kraken's going to get shut down in the United States is not something that you're too worried about.
Not at all. Not at all.
But maybe they lose some pairs or have to pay a fine or something like that.
Probably just like the banks usually have a little bit more cash on hand to be able to pay bigger fines so like JP Morgan's paid somewhere around 30 billion in fines in the last 5. So,
it's just banking fines are boring. Crypto fines are exciting.
Exactly.
It's exciting news. One of the things about it, speaking of pairs, that may give, in all these SEC lawsuits, we've seen this debate about what's security, what's a commodity, right? Now, Gary Gensler has gone on record or has made claims that everything besides Bitcoin is security. CFTC, he says that Ethereum is not a security, and they had to do significant research to come to that conclusion. But with all these lawsuits, part of the lawsuits is they do mention specific coins as being securities. Now, in this one, they mentioned ADA, Axiom V, Algorand, Atom, Dash, Filecoin, Flow, Matic, Sand, Solana, which you just mentioned, just few. No new coins were named, but they did specifically name some. So I just kind of got curious, what has been named? And this is not a 100% thorough research. I didn't look through every single lawsuit and every single document, but just looking, and they mention a bunch. But what I was looking for is what has not been mentioned that's kind of in the top 20, right? They're not going to go through all 25,000 altcoins and mention everything. They've probably mentioned, I think, 70 different tokens, right around there. So in the top 10, there's only 2 that they haven't mentioned. And in the top 20, there's a few more. So in the top 10, we have Ethereum and Dogecoin, which have not been mentioned in any essence. Ethereum being the only proof of stake one on there. It used to be proof of work. So these were a former proof of work and a proof of work coin that is not on there. Bitcoin as well. I guess I can say that. Now in the top 20, we have some more interesting ones because we have some proof of stake stuff in there. Chainlink, AVAX, Polkadot, Litecoin, Shiba Inu, and coming in at number coin Cash, which I guess is a fork of Bitcoin, so not too surprised. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting that those kind of big name coins have not yet been mentioned specifically in SEC lawsuits in the top 20. The most notable, the ones that stand to me, are kind of Chainlink and AVAX, Litecoin, but that's kind of a known proof of work coin, but where Chainlink, AVAX, Ethereum, proof of stake that haven't been mentioned as securities.
Polkadot's also proof of stake, so not mentioned in that case, and so.
But not interesting to me. I was kidding.
Polkadot, not a big token that I follow, but still had a lot of L1 hype in the last cycle, and
yeah, I'm not trying to hate on them. Sorry.
So still kind of interesting to note because they stake. If you are enjoying the content, please consider liking and subscribing. It really means a lot to us, and really. There is a comment from SEC Commissioner Hester Pierce, who hinted at support and approval for a Bitcoin spot ETF. Pierce said that the SEC has no reason to stand in the way of a Bitcoin ETF, and that her stance in this matter has been the same for years. Again, she's not so as much as she's the biggest pro Bitcoin commissioner at the SEC, her votes have almost always been in contrast with her, and so there is not really anything clear or definitive by her making this statement. She is stating that every application is being judged on its own specific set of facts and circumstances, but doesn't see a reason for the SEC to deny a Bitcoin ETF for the stock market. BlackRock and Grayscale have apparently been meeting with the SEC to discuss their ETFs, and there are still about 8 to 10 ETF applications to be decided upon, and could potentially have a major impact on the market. The first major deadline coming up is January 10th, which is the final deadline for the ARK Invest ETF. And then after that, it's March 15th for the rest of the ETFs. Quite interestingly.
Yeah, so there's a huge narrative, and it's really one of the major drivers of this market right now is that a spot ETF is coming. We got that Bloomberg report by January 10th. If the SEC, all they have to do is deny one, and then they have until March. They don't have to approve anything. We're technically in this window right now where they could approve. We could start seeing an approval. It's possible, as long as it's not the one that they're approve is not in comment period. They could approve one. We had this window before where they could approve all of them. That has passed, but they could still approve any day now. It's possible. We got this Bloomberg report, 90% by in January. So it kind of implies January 10th, so we're kind of in the season until January 10th. But all the SEC has to do is come up with some reason, some, new reason that their application, why they're going to deny it. And boom, they have until March. That could be kind of throw some cold water on the market.
It would throw some major cold water on the market. I think that would be an understatement. I would say that there's one other thing that I think they could be waiting on, and we were talking about how Binance was probably a factor that they needed to clear out of the water before approval of an ETF, and I think the other one is Grayscale and their their trust right now. BTC, if anyone was traveling around during these Thanksgiving holidays, would have seen ads in most major airports for their trust, has been trading still at a 10% discount. It's been slowly been up and kind of trying to reach peg. And I think that is probably the other thing that's being waited upon is they want Grayscale to achieve peg before they approve so that the conversion is at a 1-to-1 price. And I think it's not something that a lot of people are thinking about or talking about, but a friend of mine sent me pictures of the Grayscale ads, and I was thinking back to when I was in Austin, Texas with those ads, and I'm thinking about that discount and how it played a major role in a collapse. So could be another major factor that's done before approving the ETFs.
Yeah, that's an interesting angle. I hadn't thought of that needs to close. Yeah, I hadn't even considered that one.
It's one thing to keep an eye on. At the same time, we're seeing some pretty incredible things in the market. Even though Bitcoin's down a percent and a bit today and was down yesterday as well, kind of been in a bit of a holding pattern for the last few weeks. Basically since the start of November, we're seeing Abu Dhabi-based Phoenix Group, which is a Bitcoin mining group, raise $370 million IPO. They're a mining and co-location service provider that's based in Abu Dhabi, and that was a very large and raise for their and it was oversubscribed by an impressive 33 times. So 33 is what they wanted to raise.
They could have raised more, basically.
Yeah. Oh, they raised a lot more, with retail investors oversubscribing about 180 times more than expected. So Phoenix Group operates across a lot of different business segments with hosting and mining activities across the US, Canada, Middle East. So it also sells miners. So, it's a pretty big company and definitely getting an overwhelming response, which shows very strong interest in Bitcoin, Bitcoin mining, and the cryptocurrency industry.
Well, that's not the only good news for Bitcoin. They also had new all-time high for hash rate, and also their the mining difficulty continues to go up. So the hash rate is how many computers are actually online looking for, guessing at the to kind of make the block, right? The mining difficulty is how hard they set block. So really, it's impossible to guess the exact block. They have to get it like as close as possible. So that's the mining difficulty. So they adjusted that. It happens about every 10 minutes that a block gets mined. So they adjust this mining difficulty. The guess enough, right? It's actually like not possible to guess the exact block apparently. So it's always rounded. So that has been continuing to go up. So the Bitcoin mining difficulty has hit a historic high with a 5.07 surge. And it's been in an upward trend since 2023. And then also the hash rate is getting close to 500 exahash.
That's how you say it.
Yeah, so but either way, it's just like new highs. So it's just, significant as the crypto market watches and looks forward to the upcoming Bitcoin halving. So the last time, like the mining difficulty went down, majorly was remember when China kind of banned Bitcoin mining?
Yeah.
And then all the miners get moved around. So they made it a little easier to get the code basically to get in. This is steadily going up. A good sign for the health of the system. Now hasn't been followed exactly the hash rate, but many are expected next year. So
yeah, hash rate does tend to lead a bit. You'll often see hash rate kind of outperforming price for kind of the first few market are leading into the bull market, because you need that hash rate to get to a point really, and that difficulty to get to a point where it is absolutely unsustainable for miners to continue. And right now we're getting close to that, but we're not necessarily at that region, or at that level of unsustainability just yet. So it'll be interesting to see how it'll drive price heading into 24 and beyond. That being,
you want to hear a little side note that is so fascinating. I find it even hard to believe, but I'll say it. I believe this to be true, but I almost want to double check it before I say it, but I'm going to mention it. So when these computers guess the cryptographic the SHA, I forget what it's called exactly, the SHA, and it's a number for mining the Bitcoin block. They have to guess this exact or whatever. That they don't actually guess the exact one. They guess as close to it as possible based on this mining difficulty. So you have all these computers around the world constantly this number, this SHA number, right? Never have there as the SHA cryptographic hash, the code has been guessed twice. The same code has been guessed twice. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense in a long-winded fashion, but yeah, it makes sense.
Are you kidding me? Like it's that hard to guess it that you of all these constantly spitting this code and guessing at it, never once has the same two codes been replicated.
Which is incredible. I'm intrigued to see what transpires from that, and maybe if that ever does happen, that we see the code guessed twice.
Twice the same one.
Yeah, twice the same one. That being said, we've got some important macro numbers that could also influence the Bitcoin and your wallet. moving forward. This week, it's relatively quiet. We had median new house sales come down below forecast at 679,000 and down from 725 forecasted and from a previous read of 719. So not that great. We are also having a lot of Fed governors and Fed speak tomorrow on Tuesday, and we're also having PCE and initial jobless claims Tuesday. So PCE is expected to come in somewhere around 0.2 for core, down from 0.3 last month, and with personal income and personal spending expected to come about 0.2 as well. So be interesting to watch what happens with the Fed Beige book also coming out on Wednesday the 29th. So a lot of different data coming out this week with Jerome Powell off on Friday with the speech. So it'll be a week, I would say. Looking at CME Watch,
we got big numbers next week too, because unemployment is one that I think a lot of people watching how it's going to do, and when they pivot is when, is this recession going to come? Is unemployment going to start to sharp? So next Friday, a bunch of unemployment numbers coming out. I think people are watching that one really close too. But that's 2 weeks out.
Yeah, that's something to watch, and we are still watching the CME with a slight increase in percentage of people expecting a potential rise at this next meeting. Last week we reported that it was almost unanimous that there would be no raise in interest rates this coming meeting.
Yeah, that the terminal rate had been achieved.
And we've now seen about 3% of applicants and analysts assume a potential increase. So not of a change, but right. It's not, they're saying it's most likely the terminal rate, but it's definitely not being a cut yet, which is interesting. And when we go to January actually has an even greater likelihood that there is a raise, coming in at 11% chance of seeing a raise in January. So some analysts now thinking, maybe we don't get away with.
We're a little less confident that we've reached the terminal rate. I mean, that's the general, but it's a mild change. But you said last week was like, whoa, we're done. And this week it's like, no, maybe we're not done. And we got new numbers coming out. We got PCE and then we got unemployment, and these numbers can change, and they can change drastically sometimes.
Yeah, we're still seeing a fairly 50-50 split that we would likely see a raise in rates, or just over 50% seeing a cut in rates in May. That's the general consensus right now, is a Fed pivot most likely in May, with some saying as early as March. I would think that the May people, just the fact that it's more 50-50 at this point, with an almost guaranteed 75 start lumber for potential first cut in rates. Something to keep an eye on.
Let's get into some of these altcoin news, a little bit of the lower cap stuff. Although Tron's top
20 or top 50?
No, it's in the top 20. I think it might even be number 10 in market cap. But anyway, so part of the narrative is going on right now. Number 10 market cap at $9 billion, which surprises me too closely. I don't want to FUD too much, but there's just something about Justin that puts me off a little bit. He's not horrible, but something I don't trust about the guy. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But one of the narratives going on, so with this Binance lawsuit, is that they're not properly reporting or filing suspicious activity reports when it has to do with terrorism. We all know terrorism, it's an angle of attack for the government. So there's a Reuters report coming out that Hamas and Hezbollah now prefer Tron over Bitcoin. Just kind of that narrative and we'll see if how Tron deals with it. We also have some news about a new Ethereum layer 2 protocol, Blast, that's kind of come out of nowhere. Have you seen this one?
Yeah, I've even put a little bit of money in. So don't take any of this as financial advice. I put in less than $100, so we're very, very play on my part. A new L2 because they don't actually even have a test net yet. There's no chain. You essentially bridge funds onto their chain. It's really just depositing funds into a multi-sig wallet, so you're not really even bridging funds yet. But they've announced that they will be a yield-bearing L2, so you will natively earn ETH and on your ETH and USD on the chain just by holding funds there. They're not offering any kind of ridiculous APY. It's about 4% on ETH and percent on USDC. So essentially the standard what you'd get from liquid state either of those tokens. So crazy.
Initial advice, but man, I'm avoiding that. I like to play just on everything you're saying. Like on the surface, just sounds a little shady to me. It's called Blast. It's like implies almost a pump and dump. Like it's just gonna blast off, blow up, and then disappear. But we'll see how it all goes.
Yeah, as I said, I put they're offering.
You gotta take risks. You gotta take it, man. I wish you the best. Like it's all good.
That's it. I'm only risking
gambling money.
Yeah, it's $100. I'm sure you could burn more than that doing.
When was the last time you went to an actual casino?
I've never been to an actual casino.
You don't need to.
That's it. So I'm not too overly concerned. I'm taking a small risk. They're announcing a potential airdrop in May with people being able to bridge their funds.
Aren't there some big name kind of names behind it?
There's a couple major backers that have said that at least the team is going to be backing the project. Both Crypto and Paradigm are claimed to be backers of the project, and they've announced their non-real names, CL, Degen Spartan, Santiago, and Andrew Kang. So really nothing major just yet, but something to keep an eye on.
I just started hearing about it, getting some play.
They raised $440 million deposits over the first 7 days that deposits were open. So
now you know where all this selling from all the other ones. Anyway, we got a Cosmos as well. They had kind of a pump and a dump. They went up, pretty drastically earlier in the week, and they're down pretty hard today. So they had their most attended vote in their ecosystem. Over 70% of holders came and voted to pretty drastically reduce their inflation, 20% to 10%. Really seemed to pump up the price. Just the level of activity, the fact that inflation was going down, all seems to be narratives that would help drive. However, the founder was not in favor of this, and it didn't even get over 50% of the vote. It was like a 40 to 30 vote. So I think he was part of that, upset him a little bit. But he's going to relaunch and hard fork the thing. So it's back down maybe before it started, on the pump. So
it's still up 1% on the last 7 days. It's one of about 30 tokens that for the last 7 days.
The general discontent in the air over in that ecosystem.
Oh, absolutely. I'd say that
and the airdrop he's talking about is only, I thought this was kind of an interesting note in it, only going towards the people who voted not to change the inflation rate. So the people who voted against this proposal to this new airdrop. I thought that was kind of intriguing little aspect to this.
I mean, it sounds kind of just like a
little bit.
Like a petty.
On the surface, it does very much, yeah.
It's like a teenager saying, hearing, "Oh, you don't agree with
You're
me?
on my team.
You're on
Yeah.
you're not on my team. I don't
I
want
remember
you."
when Bitcoin Cash came out, it was like, if you had Bitcoin, you got Bitcoin Cash. It didn't terminate. It wasn't whether I voted or not. Not that you can.
No, but I think the whole reason why Bitcoin Cash did that was because they wanted to try to win you over. This is just some petty squabble.
Well, we don't petty squabble, right, Ozzy?
No squabble.
All right. Well, but we're not financial advisors, and we don't provide financial advice. And we just want to thank you very much for listening to Decentralized News. Please consider subscribing to catch the videos as soon as they drop. Our goal is to provide unfiltered content that will help this entire space grow. Again, we're not financial advice, not financial advisors. The show is presented for educational and entertainment purposes only. Thank you for your support, and stay tuned